But I didn't really want to make this video. I kept on thinking about it and thinking, well, I've got so much to say and it's all scattered around and I can't get it organized, and I don't want to make a video if I can't say it clearly because people are going to be jumping down my throat if I say it the wrong way, and people are probably going to be jumping down my throat even if I say it the right way. So I'm not sure I want to be doing this. However, it does bring to mind a question that I have been asking. It's a personal prejudice of mine, and I would very much like anybody watching this video, if you have a solid, well-constructed argument against my deeply held prejudices, I would very much appreciate hearing it. I would love it if you shared it with me, because I have this prejudice, and the research that I have done so far, which is not great research by any means, has reinforced my earlier thinking. I suppose I didn't start out with this prejudice. In fact, quite the contrary. For many, many years I didn't have this prejudice, and then I started reading up about the issue and have developed a prejudice. And the prejudice is that I am deeply inclined to think, and I am very, very much open to the idea that I'm wrong, so please, again, if I am saying something that is incorrect, please take the time to give me a counter argument. Tell me how I'm wrong. Don't just tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me how. Help me to understand. But my prejudice is that I honestly think, at this point in my life, that the majority, if not all, transgender people are mentally ill. I think it is a symptom of mental illness in at least 90% of cases, probably more than that. It's a symptom of mental illness as opposed to a mental illness in and of itself, in many, many cases, myself included. I knew transgender people before it became popular. And I don't say this to be all trendy and edgy and, oh, I knew this before it was cool. I don't always fit this the feminine stereotype as well as most girls do. I know there were a lot of people in the comments of my last video who were like, they were expressing concern, which was very sweet of you guys. But just because you don't like makeup, that doesn't make you trans. And it's like, no, I've never said that I think I'm trans because I don't like makeup. I would not say that. I don't necessarily think I'm trans. Which leads me to another point. What is trans? I don't think many people outside of the community know, and it's a very interesting question to ask. I have a very firm belief that in order to know the answer to any question, a person needs to ask the question, even the stupid, obvious questions. If you don't ask the questions, you do not know the answer. I used to say this when I was very young in church, and I pissed off everybody because they were like, well, you need to have faith in God. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to establish first that I believe in God in order to have faith in God. I can't have faith in something that I don't know whether I believe in it or not. Do I believe in God? That's a question that I need to ask. Well, you should just have faith. No, I need to ask the question, and then I can have faith. I can have boundless amounts of faith once I have established what I believe in the first place. Until that point, you're not getting any faith out of me. They were so mad. They were sure I was going to hell. In order to know the answer to any question, a person has to ask the question first. If you do not establish that a thing exists, you do not know. And so I like to ask some questions that might sound extremely prejudiced or extremely bigoted or extremely stupid. And in asking them, I learn a considerable amount of information, not necessarily the answer to the question itself. And this is one of those questions. What is it to be trans? What does it mean? So for those people who don't know much about the trans community because I didn't know anything about the trans community for a very long time, which is funny because I said I knew trans people. I did. I knew trans people when I was young, but the community has changed drastically since I was young. I'm 36. I ain't young anymore. When I was young, when I was 21, I met this very lovely trans lady, and she was a little concerned about me because I was presenting very masculine, and she was wondering why I looked like a man, and so she asked me, you know. I don't think she would have used those words exactly, but basically she asked me several questions along the lines of, "Hey, anything going on here?" And she told me her story and her experiences, and she was very open with me, and she was very patient with me, and I've always been very grateful to this person that I met who told me her story. She was a very sweet lady, and you never would have guessed that she was originally in her life a man. She was extremely tall, but sometimes, well, I mean, I'm a short person, so everybody's taller than I am, but she was extremely tall, and some women are tall. She was very sweet. She had this lovely old lady persona, like the kind that keeps like candies inside her oversized purse and occasionally gives you a hard candy if you're having a bad day. She was just a wonderful and delightful human being. And she asked me many questions, and ultimately she came to the conclusion that, probably wasn't trans. And I took that as good enough. This lady knew her business. She worked with a youth group for young trans people who were going through transition. She knew the community very well, and she was well informed, and she was very careful with her questions, and she was very careful to listen to what I had to say. And I looked at it, and it was like, I was 21? Yeah, I was 21. And I had just become an exotic dancer. So I was very comfortable with my body at that point, because I had spent several months recovering from the things that had happened to me in high school. When I graduated high school, my body was barely functional. And when I became an exotic dancer, my body started functioning first at an average speed and then at a slightly above average speed as I went from being very weak and unhealthy to being a moderate to normal level of fitness to being an athletic level of fitness, and being healthy and having energy and being able to move around and being able to breathe and all these things that healthy people take for granted that I had never in my memory been able to take for granted. I'm sure when I was a toddler I was able to breathe, but suddenly my body was functional. I didn't give a shit about gender. I cared about functionality. Does it breathe? Does it move? Does it operate properly? Does it obey me when I tell my arm to lift? Does my arm lift? Because I had been so royally fucked up for so many years, those were my chief concerns. Gender, sexuality, all that. I mean, I didn't care. I had never really cared. In fact, I remember being, in high school, in middle school, all those teenage years, just looking at it and thinking, I really don't care about this crap. Other people were getting crushes. Other people were dating. My parents, of course, were very conservative. They told me I wasn't allowed to date till I was 18. So it was like, one less problem I have to worry about. I'll worry about it when I turn 18. And I just didn't pay attention to any of that stuff. And so it always seemed very strange to me, like, that people cared about any of that. It was odd. So when I met this lady and she's asking me questions like, have you ever felt really unhappy with your body? It's like, well, yes, I have, but it wasn't with my gender. And so we talked about that a bit, and she concluded, You don't want any kind of surgeries to make you look like a man. You don't want to do anything medical to change yourself to be more masculine. You just happen to be a very masculine woman. And I was like, cool, man. Sounds good, you know? I go on about my life. Interesting lady, interesting conversation, interesting getting to know her. Life goes on. Years pass. A decade passes. A decade and a half. And I see the world changing around me. And being transgender doesn't mean what it meant a decade and a half ago. The definition has, in popular culture at least, broadened dramatically. There was a time that a person like me would not be perceived as transgender. Just a somewhat masculine woman. But now things are a little different. And if you spend any time learning about or reading about the transgender community, you're going to very quickly learn about two opposing factions within the community. I don't know how much they get talked about in the mainstream media, but they're there, they exist, and they butt heads rather constantly. There are people like the lady that I met when I was young, the more old school transgender people, who believe that being transgender is the result of something called gender dysphoria, where you are, say, a woman, and you feel very deeply and very profoundly that you should be a man and that you are in the wrong body. And you are very, very willing, more than willing, eager to make any kind of changes necessary to alleviate the mental distress caused by that gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria. You want that gone. And you are willing to take hormones to get rid of it. You are willing to undergo surgeries to get rid of it. You want to take on as much as possible a passable appearance of the opposite biological gender so that you can live in a body that feels like the right body for you. This is the classic understanding of what transgender means. This is the old school understanding of what transgender means. So a decade and a half ago when I met this lady, she had a very standard understanding of what it meant to be transgender, and we discussed it, and she concluded that because I was not eager to change my physical appearance or take hormones or do surgery, I, wasn't transgender. I was just masculine for a woman, sort of really masculine for a woman. Fair enough. The other faction in the currently existing transgender community is what I think of as the community. For a long time, being transgender was an extremely rare thing. It hardly ever happened. They existed, they popped up every now and then, but they were very rare. There weren't many transgender people in this world. They were rare and beautiful and precious and different. These days, you can't toss a pebble in a crowded room without accidentally hitting somebody who is transgender, is related to someone who's transgender, or is close friends with someone who's transgender. They're everywhere. Where do they all come from? And that's where you get into the genderqueer, the non-binary, the two-spirit, the what have you. The people who aren't falling within that narrow definition of I have gender dysphoria, I don't feel like my body is correct, I want to correct the things about my body that feel wrong, and this is what transgender is. There's all these other people And I don't know how many of you guys see it, but I see it. I go on like TikTok and I see so much pink and blue. I don't even like pastels, so it drives me up a fucking wall. The trans flag just makes me sick to my stomach. It's like, why does that have to be our flag? The bi flag is cool. Like, it's got these deep, dramatic colors, and it's like, hell yeah, that's my flag. The trans flag, I just look at it and it's like, not for me. There's got to be some other symbol out there because that just ain't mine. Um, I do not like it. Just as a matter of pure aesthetic appeal, it lacks severely for me. Um, but I see all these young people, and they've got their trans flags out, and I don't really know what they're doing, but there's a lot of glitter and brightly dyed hair and a lot of ambiguity going on here. And I suppose it's rather hypocritical of me to complain about ambiguity. I've looked in a mirror. But I mean, I just always kind of took it for granted, like everybody knows I'm a woman. Like, even the people who mistake me for a man, because that happens, especially, I'm expecting it to happen more now that I've gotten a haircut. I mean, they mistake you for a man, fine. But the moment you open your mouth and say anything, they know. It's like, dude, you can't hide this. I could take hormones, but there's no way in hell I'm gonna take hormones. I sound like a woman, and I'm 5'3", and I've got boobs that I just can't escape from. I mean, I would like to surgically alter that, but that's a mess for a later time. But yeah, the ambiguity in the other side of the trans community, I don't know what to make of it. I'm not going to judge it. It seems weird to me, but I think weird is kind of the aesthetic they're going for. I do not wish to place judgment at this time, because I just don't know. Obviously, these are people. Obviously, they have their reasons for thinking the way they do. I can't criticize them too much when I'm going to my doctor and asking for a double mastectomy. I wasn't looking for that because I thought that I was trans. Originally, I was looking for a very extreme breast reduction. And my research of very extreme breast reductions was not particularly useful because most people who have... the temptation is to just open up my shirt and be like, okay, see this? Is too big. I don't have any kinds of problems with them. They're very average size. They're actually slightly petite compared to some of the things I've seen out there. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They're very, very functional pieces of bodily tissue. I have fed 4 children with them, and they work very well in doing what they're designed to do. However, they are secondary sexual characteristics as well as being baby feeding machines. And so they have an unnerving tendency to attract attention that I don't want or appreciate. If I had the money, and I don't have the money, so this isn't something that's going to happen soon, I would eventually, my husband and I have been discussing a 5th kid, so eventually, like to obtain an A cup, something to just really bring that stuff down, tuck it in, get it out of my way. That's not necessarily a trans thing, but if you say, hey, I'm trans and I want top surgery, everybody understands what you're asking for. There's no mystery. There's no, what do you mean? Why? Why would you want that? It's like, you know why I want it. I want it because I want it and I want to get it. Thank you. I would be an easy patient. I don't want to have my nipples readjusted or anything like that. I mean, they shave down your nipples, and I just no, thank you. I'm good. I don't need that in my life. These are perfectly functional. I just want to reduce the volume, please. Does that count as trans? No. No, I don't think so. I mean, no, no. Would I still qualify as trans according to the secondary group of people who are now considering themselves transgender? They would say I am. All these new people who are saying they're transgender, who are, giving us their pronouns. What is it with the they, them? I still haven't heard a good argument for that. I still haven't heard anybody really put it out clearly. I did not understand. No, the thing about the non-binary, gender ambiguous branch, this massive branch of the trans community that never really existed before. The thing about them is that it's very easy to just kind of write them off as people who self-diagnose on the internet, and I have issues with people who self-diagnose on the internet. I'm a hypocrite, by the way. I am very insistent, despite the opinions of 2 different therapists to this point who are sure that I have bipolar disorder. I am very insistent that I do not have bipolar disorder. I have ADHD, because this is a disorganized mess. It is always a disorganized mess. It isn't one of those things that goes up and down with my moods. I am always hyper and disorganized. Very annoying. I don't think that I have bipolar. I am more than happy to diagnose myself with ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 12, but nobody ever followed up on it. 12? Yes, 12. 10. It might have been 10. I can't remember offhand. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was a long time ago. I don't like people self-diagnosing on the internet because they throw out all these labels that sound cool, and they sometimes cancel each other out. You can't have both of these diseases at the same time sometimes, but somehow people say that they have them. It could be that they went through the merry-go-round of therapists, and different therapists stuck different labels to them at different times, and they took all those labels and kind of said, okay, I guess I have all of these. But I think a lot of them are just people who are like, well, this sounds like me, so I must have it. I don't have bipolar. I just don't. I've tried to fit into that box because obviously 2 different therapists very sure I have bipolar disorder. There's got to be some way to fit me into this box, right? So I mean, obviously I am a hypocrite. I'll be the first person to say I am a hypocrite. But I don't like it when people self-diagnose, and so it's very easy to look at the massive, the trans umbrella. I call it the trans umbrella too. It used to be this little teeny umbrella, and there was this little group of people that were kind of huddled under the umbrella, and it wasn't very big. And now it's grown and grown and grown and grown, and now all of these people fit under the trans umbrella. And that's why I can walk through a grocery store and see trans flags all over the place, like on pins and on jewelry and just all over the freaking place. It's like, where do all these people come from? And it's very easy to say, there's a lot of people out there who want attention. They want to be unique little snowflakes. They want to be special. They want to have labels so that they feel like they belong in a special little community. All this crap, right? And then I mean, maybe that's what's going on with a lot of them. Maybe. Easy enough. Yeah. But there's another way to look at it. And so instead of just saying that's got to be what's going on, let's look at the other way. There's a thing called, I think, the Benjamin scale. There was a doctor whose name was Benjamin, last name was Benjamin, who developed a scale of transsexual severity. I don't remember exactly what he called it. If you just look up the Benjamin scale, you'll find out about it. And he had a list of people going in range of severity from kind of trans, but not really, to kind of trans, but not really, to trans, but not entirely, to okay, I guess we're doing the surgery. A lot of people in the trans community hate the Benjamin scale because one of the factors that he used to rule people out of being that final precious category of, yes, you definitely need the surgery, are you attracted to members of the opposite sex? So if you are, say, a woman who comes in and says, I am a man, he asks, well, who do you want to sleep with, men or women? And for me, it would be a little tricky because I'll say, C, all of the above. But say I said, I like sleeping with men, but I also identify as a man. I believe that I am a man, but I want to be a gay man. He'd be like, no, sorry, that's not going to work. And I mean, this was a scale that was developed a long time ago, back when people thought that homosexuality wasn't such a great thing either. I know there are still people in this world who think homosexuality isn't a great thing. Personally, I have no problems with it. I suppose I wouldn't, since I've, yeah. But anyway, a lot of people in the trans community hate the Benjamin scale. They just outright straight up, yeah, this is outdated. Let's just chuck it away in the garbage. Let's never look at this again. This is an old piece of trans history. It's not necessary in this day and age. But I think that he might have been on to something. Like, I'm not going to say for sure that he was on to something, but I mean, let's look at it. Let's ask the question. What if he was on to something? So you've got this scale of degrees by which people can be trans. You can have your very extreme situations where a person is, as he would call it, a true transsexual, where they absolutely need the surgery to alleviate the symptoms of crushing gender dysphoria. But there are all these other kind of subgroups. I can't remember them all that well. Like, he had terms for them. I don't remember the terms. But he had all these other subgroups that were much milder in their symptoms. Is that what we're seeing right now? It used to be that tomboy was a thing. Remember tomboys? I kind of like the word tomboy more than I like the word butch, personally. I mean, granted, there are some butch women who look fantastic, don't get me wrong, but for myself personally, I think tomboy is a little bit more fitting. Butch, I just feel like if I called myself butch or described myself as butch, somebody I know somewhere in this world would laugh at me. I don't know who, but they're out there, and I don't want them to laugh at me. So, I mean, but yeah, you remember tomboys? Tomboys were a thing. I remember tomboys. Nobody ever described me as a tomboy when I was younger. I just sort of, as I grew up, kind of got manlier. All on my own. I don't really know why. I know why they didn't describe me as a tomboy as a kid. I just realized I wasn't capable of moving around very well, so I had to just sit a lot of the time because my body wasn't working. That would probably have something to do with it. So I seemed very feminine. I was just sitting there all the time. Couldn't do much. Couldn't be very physically active. God, I remember telling my parents I wanted to grow up to be an acrobat. They were like, no, honey, you don't want to do that. Yes, I do. Hey, Mom and Dad, if you don't teach me to be an acrobat as a kid, I'm going to grow up to be a stripper, because that's acrobatics too. So nobody would have called me a tomboy when I was a kid, but then, when I grew up and I got healthy and my body started working again, all of a sudden this new person came out and it was like, wow, she's... So I wonder sometimes, all these people who are now under the trans umbrella, all these genderqueer, non-binary, I identify as an attack helicopter, all these people... were they always there? Have they always been there? Is that where all the tomboys disappeared off to? Where do they all go? Like, is that where all the effeminate men go now? Is that where all the people who don't quite fit into this perfect niche of what it is to be male or female, is this where they all go? And to support that argument, one of the things that I notice a lot I won't say it's an all the time thing, but I do notice there's this recurring theme when I listen to transgender people talking. And the recurring theme is, I was raised in a very conservative environment. And I think that's interesting. So you got all these people who were raised in a very conservative Christian environment who don't fit this predefined, narrow idea of what it is to be either male or female. I think the more restrictive that definition gets, the more people find themselves falling outside of it. What does it mean to be a man? Well, you can be a man who also has some very feminine traits. Shit happens, and it's not bad. Sometimes it's really, really good. It means you're a well-balanced person. You're you. You figured it out. You know what you like. You're being that thing that you are. Good for you. For me, I didn't really pay attention to gender. I was a sick kid. I grew up to be a healthy adult by accident. And strip clubs. And I looked at it and was like, you know what? It functions. Who cares? I don't necessarily care if I'm seen as a man or seen as a woman. I love being seen as a man. I think it's just, I don't know. Like, for the longest time, I was like, I don't know why I'm getting a kick out of this. And then I learned about autogynephilia, and I just wanted to die inside. It's like, please tell me that that's not me. And I was talking with my husband today about that. I was like, autogynephilia, I do not understand it. Because I think for me, so many of the attempts that I've made to make myself appear more masculine, the more masculine clothing that I wear, the more masculine hairstyles, although there's a functional element to that I just cannot deny. This is so easy. The desire to hide my breasts and other secondary sexual characteristics. This isn't me exhibiting a sexual fetish toward being male. Like, that was the thing with cross-dressing. On the one hand, it was like, well, it would be interesting to try. And on the other hand, it's like, do I really feel confident enough to wear a suit and tie? No, I do not. For me, it's about hiding my sexuality. For me, it's about tamping it down because it's a little too pronounced. And I want to just kind of just dim that brightness a little bit so that I can get through my day-to-day life without being so inescapably female. I just want to kind of dim it down. Let's just take it down a few notches a little bit. It's too much. This right here, it's too much. And I was telling my husband, like, it attracts attention, and I don't want it to attract attention. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. Do I like hanging out with men? I love hanging out with men. I love it. But I don't want them to be looking at me like I'm a woman. So anyway, I'm telling my husband all this, and I'm sitting there, just explaining it to him, and he's like, you sound like a rape victim. And I kind of paused for a second. He's like, I don't mean that in a bad way. And I just thought about that. I was like, autogynephilia makes me deeply uncomfortable because everything about me that could be interpreted as being trans is my desperate attempt to escape the appearance of sexuality. Like, I was thinking about it. It's like, I'd love to wear pretty girly outfits, but I can't wear the kind of clothes I want to wear, or at least I feel like I can't, because at this point in my life, I look too sexual, and I can't escape it. So something a little bit neutralizing for me, like surgery, that's not a trans thing. That's an I want to escape the fact that anybody who sees me, unless I'm wearing like super baggy clothes, and even then when I'm wearing super baggy clothes, they recognize that I am female, that I am physically fit, and that I am reproductively very healthy. I'm fertile, okay? Everybody knows it. I can't escape it and I can't hide it. I would love to. I would love to hide it. Let's just not show off that whole thing that's going on here for a little while. That would be awesome. Like I said, it attracts the wrong kind of attention. That's just my own feelings on the matter. And that's another reason that I don't know if it's fair or reasonable to call me trans. However, I also understand how the trans community would look at me and look at the decisions I make, the way I dress, the way I love to style my hair. Oh my God, I did this yesterday and I'm still just getting over the fuzziness. It's so fuzzy. They would look at me and be like, "You are definitely trans." And I would look at it and say, I can't say that they're wrong. I mean, think about it. Depending on how you define what trans is, and there are two opposing views here within the trans community, by one definition, the original definition that we had for a very long time, you are trans if you experience gender dysphoria. If you're not having the gender dysphoria, you're not trans. Versus I don't know, it's like everything is trans. If you're gender non-conforming, then you're trans. If you wish you were the opposite gender because it seems like a cool idea, you're trans. If you want to experience the world as the opposite gender, you're trans. Anything goes with that second group, that second faction of the trans community. Anything goes. And at the same time, I think there's a certain extent to which they're not entirely wrong. What was it? What was her name? ContraPoints. That was the name. ContraPoints. I need to leave a link to that video. Did a beautifully thought out video on it. And I didn't know what she was talking about the first time I watched the video. And I was like, what am I seeing? What is she talking about? What's this? What's that? What's an egg? What does any of this mean? And then, I watched it again after having researched the trans community a ton. And it was like, oh, this is a very nuanced video. She's really put some thought into it. Brilliantly thought out video, because she hits on all the points on both arguments. And everybody got mad at her because they're like, you're criticizing the trans community. It's like she's taking all of the different arguments and putting them all in one spot so that you can weigh them against each other. That's good. That's important. People need to do that. How do you know the answer to a question unless you ask the question? I don't know if they're wrong, though. If trans is the way they try to define it, I would say maybe, rough number, just throwing a number out there, 20% of the population is trans at that point. Because we've gotten to the point, and this is something I see in the manosphere, where men are like, well, Rollo Tomassi says a woman is this. It's like, let's have this extraordinarily paper-thin definition of what a woman is, with no room for exceptions or exemptions or changes. I mean, even Tomassi, at least in his books, he had that CYA moment. Just to cover my ass, there are women who are not necessarily going to follow these patterns because of social expectations. Whatever, Rollo, whatever. We've got this definition that I think is largely generated by people who've read the books and have come to their own conclusions, that a woman is exactly this and only this. And a man, even worse in some ways, is either an alpha male, narrowly defined, but also ambiguously defined, which makes it even worse, or a beta schmuck, which is very ambiguously defined, but broadly defined, and just nobody wants to be that thing. So they're all trying to convince themselves they're not, while secretly fearing that they are. If you don't fall inside these categories very neatly or nicely, you're kind of just out floating in the ether. I remember when I was doing the reviews on The Rational Male, I would get these comments from guys who were like, oh, you do experience this thing you say you don't experience. You just don't consciously experience it. And I'm sitting there like, I'm experiencing the opposite of it. What would you call that? There isn't a subconscious thing when the exact opposite is happening. But they had to fit me into that narrow definition. You just have to. You have to. That's what a woman is. Well, I must not be a woman then. So what am I? 20% of the population. Easy. 20% of the population is trans. The umbrella is that big. Congratulations, you have a new label. You can choose your pronouns at the door. I remember I was working at the Walmart and they had these pins. It was like he she pins, or like it was like pronoun pins. So it was like you could have like him, his, he him, his, or she her hers, all those. And there was this gal who went and picked one up and very dutifully put it on, and I'm sitting there looking at it as like, you forgot to add the they thems or the zers or any of these other made-up words that are just floating around on the internet these days. Like, who actually uses those words? Who remembers to use all those words? And yes, if you're one of those people with those words, you can be as pissed at me as you want to be, but functionally, as a language that we speak to communicate the thoughts and ideas behind the words we're saying, does that serve a purpose? I do not believe so. I think it's just fluff. I think it's posturing. And I honestly do not think that there is something as a middle gender. I think the non-binaries, the genderqueer people, the they thems, I think that they are all their biological gender. They just happen to be people like me who don't fit the narrow definition very well. When I finally publish a book, it will be under a male pen name, because that's what fits me. I'm not going to ask anybody to change my pronouns around. It would be really difficult for them to do so. I don't pass as a male for more than a minute in any company. There have been several times that I have been mistaken for a dude. Several times. Sometimes for up to about a minute. But then at some point, I say something like, with my voice being what it is, or they just notice, like, oh my gosh, she's got a pair of giant knockers. It's kind of inevitable that sooner or later somebody will notice that I am entirely physically female. But am I, not fitting into that narrow definition that you have of it? Well, no, I don't. I never will. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do, whatever the hell I feel inclined to do. If it's a feminine thing and I feel inclined to do it, then I'm going to do it. If it's a masculine thing and I feel inclined to do it, then I'm going to do it. I don't need special pronouns to do the things that I want to do in life. I'm going to go out and do them. There is no need to complicate matters, in my opinion. And again, if I'm wrong, explain it to me. Help me understand. Walk me through it, please. Take the time and show the patience to do that. But I just don't see much of a point in the they thems. And I see a lot of other people who don't see a point in the they thems either. Are there people who might be what you would define as non-binary, in the sense that they don't fit into those clearly, those razor thin lines of, oh, this is definitely male and this is definitely female and you have to do exactly this or you have to do exactly that? Maybe it's not 20% of the population that fits under the trans umbrella. Maybe it's 80% of the population or even 90% of the population that fits under the trans umbrella, because those definitions of what it is to be male or female, they're very, very narrow. And when they are so narrow that people who are just being people don't fit into them, well, then you've got an ocean of non-binary humans, which honestly is exactly what we have right now, an ocean of non-binary people. Me? Yeah, pretty non-binary. Am I going to call myself non-binary? No, why would I do that? That's weird. No. I have a life, you guys. I've got chickens. They're weird little bastards and they poop everywhere. I have to clean that up. And they lay eggs. And they don't lay eggs in the nesting boxes. For some reason, there's this cage that I have in the back of the coop, and they like laying the eggs inside the cage. So then I have to crawl into the cage. It's a dog crate for when we have a sick chicken who needs to be isolated. I have to crawl into that darn thing, and then I have to retrieve all the eggs. I have things to do with my life. Do I want to be called they, them? No. Who's got time for that? I don't have time for that. I want to do a video on trans history because it's fascinating. It's fascinating to me. Because there was a time where hormones and surgeries weren't part of this whole deal. There are women in this world who went out and became socially men. They call it social transitioning, but basically they took on the role of men and lived their lives as men. A lot of them were lesbians, let's be honest, but I mean, they didn't want to play the female role. And once upon a time in history, gender roles were a little more defined. And, you were kind of stuck sometimes in not such great places. Frequently, in the cases that I read where I could get that information, trauma was also part of it. It seems that trauma is frequently a part of it, and so that's why when I read through the cases, these situations where it's like, oh, this person, before we had a word for trans, this person went out and said to the world, I'm just going to be a man, and you're all going to have to live with it. If you look at their life story, their history, their biography, you've noticed that there's a history of trauma in there, which I think is interesting and something to be looked at. Like, why is this? Why are people like this? Why are people suddenly deciding that they just aren't whatever their biological gender is? Why is that? What does that mean? If you don't ask the question, you don't know the answer. But I think that's it. So I'll talk to you guys later and have a wonderful night.